another way that we can do it is that we can start to build an actual global organization based off of cryptocurrency. And then the state and the nations will have to compete with that, and their nation GDP might be affected by the fact that people would rather be global citizens as opposed to national citizens. And if we bring that another step further, we can also have state currencies again. You remember that? It was kind of confusing, and it made it a little bit different, but you could also then Forex trade within the same nation when you're in the United States. But that became an unfair advantage, basically, and so the Federal Reserve was created. Well, I mean, in other words, the Federal Reserve was created strictly to destroy the country. You know, there's no nuance about it. There's no nuance. There's none. There's no nuance to be had. You know, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. But the Fed needs to go. Or, you know, but I don't think that just getting rid of it all at once would be the best idea. It might be the only idea. But again, competition is the best way to win, not by changing the rules. Don't change the rules to win. Compete. But yeah, that's what everybody on the right needs to figure out, and on the left needs to figure out on Twitter right now, as they try to make sure that the rules can go in their favor, or the rules are their form of equal. Just being like, yeah, no, I think we should allow for a global currency like Bitcoin to actually be something that, you know, businesses are like, hey, the Square is deciding that they're not going to allow us to sell glass at our tobacco shop anymore because they're calling it drug paraphernalia. And I'm gonna not wait, because I'm pretty sure if we lose all of these sales because of this, and then I sue Square in a class action, they're gonna be able to weasel their way out of it. But really what that is a 14th, is that the 14th Amendment violation? Yes. Fuck yes. A 14th Amendment violation? Yes. So if you're a lawyer, I made sense all the way up until that moment. It is a violation of the 14th Amendment. Which, by the way, the 14th Amendment can be amended, but not the first 10. The first 10 cannot be amended. They just can't. That's not how it works. Right? Because the Constitution was not passed without the first 10 amendments. The first 10 amendments are there just as a general sense of, here, we went through all of the process we practiced and basically demonstrated how this process would work in order to get these 10 amendments. And then we can have it ratified. And the Federalists can play this game in their head that means that the Constitution without the 10 amendments is a thing, so we can amend and expand on those 10 amendments. But the only way that we could do that is by providing more limitations on government. We can't do that in comparison to relieve the government from the restrictions that are given. Quite in the contrary, is what I mean. We can say things that take away more government powers. We can't say things and amend to the original 10 amendments the ability for the government to take those things away, that which were decided upon ratification were unalienable. Clearly enumerated and in clear language, unalienable, and just an observation of natural order, natural law, and natural consequence. Meaning those are things that we want the government to avoid doing because it will ultimately destroy whatever system we're working on if those 10 amendments get violated. It's basically a 10-step plan to overthrowing any government that you want, starting with 10 and working your way all the way to 1. Shall we have fun with that? Because I can walk you through it. Where we have 10, power is delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So first we would say, no, the government gets to decide those things, the federal government specifically. If it's not delegated by the Constitution, what says you have a right to do it? That's where you start. Okay? Amendment 9. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by that people. This is offensive to talk about. Therefore, and this could be a threat to our democracy, which is, of course, falling back on the 10th Amendment, okay, the enumeration of in the Constitution of certain rights. So it's like, that's my, as a private corporation, right to free speech. I can take whatever the fuck I want off my platform. It doesn't matter that I'm basically a commodity. I see no responsibility because, again, I don't see in here how you have the right to talk the way that you do on my platform. And the government is telling me that shit like what you said doesn't belong on a platform. Amendment 10. Amendment 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. So then you get like group shaming, mob mentality, our democracy, ins and outs, pandemic of the unvaccinated, lock them down, wear the mask, take the shot. Okay? Then we have Amendment 7. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right to trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined by any court of the United States, then according to the rules of the common law. Do we follow that? Or do we see excessive bails? Do we see people coming in and being tricked out into signing something so that the judge can just be the judge and the jury? Yeah, we kind of see that too. So that's the 7th Amendment, and then we have the 6th Amendment. Okay, so each of these go in order. You need one of these. You need each of these in step, working backwards to dismantle this Constitution. All criminal prosecutions, Trump. The accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, Trump, and January 6th detainees, because some of them were detained for years and then the charges were dropped, by the way. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law. This is talking about jurisdiction, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. Now, let's go back to the jury instructions for the Trump trial. What is the accusation? Arguably, the jury doesn't even have to decide on what crime it was. It was just probably either this crime or this crime or this crime, and because it's either of those, in combination, we know he's guilty, just not of what specifically. They don't even have to decide that. They didn't even have to decide that in that trial. So this is the 7th Amendment right here. To be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and have the assistance of counsel for his defense. And how many people don't even get proper assistance of counsel, and it just goes under the radar. Amendment 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. That's where we say, I plead the 5th. Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So now we started with the private corporations in Amendment 10 working with the governments. Now I want to bring up our data that is semi-publicly available and traded, and a lot of money is being made off of that advertisement. And we don't see any of that money. And we're laughed at when we talk about things like UBI, but these executives are getting free money just because they're observing us in very unique ways. That's our data. That's our private property that is anonymized. That's the only reason why that's not unconstitutional. Because it's anonymized. And how quickly is that de-anonymized? Which then we start to wonder, okay, this is an unalienable right. Right? So if the government stands back and allows this to happen, what can happen next? The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So we don't have a gun registry, but the government can demand that gun sellers keep their own independent registry, and they can universalize it so that they can be able to access it at any time that they want, but they don't have access to a gun registry. You just have to register your firearm, and they can end up finding who was registered to your firearm because whatever. you know. And then in other words, we have unreasonable searches and things like that. They go, we'd like to get into Apple, and Apple goes, yeah, sure. Just because they're observing us in very unique ways. That's our data. And they might even be forceful about it, in which case Apple should have blew the whistle if Apple didn't, And then Apple did later be like, no, you can't get in. And that made people feel a little bit better. Why? Because they felt like their rights were acknowledged. So there's two things that I'm talking about here. There is the limitations on government enumerated by the first 10 amendments. And then the other thing that I'm talking about is how the first 10 amendments are actually observably, measurably natural laws that when broken have consequence, that the Constitution in the first 10 amendments are trying to avoid. Okay, then we get to the third amendment. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Telecommute. When you have soldiers telecommuting to go and talk to people, is it a peacetime? Is it a wartime? Why is there soldiers that are quartered for long periods of time in private houses? Because again, now the surveillance apparatus becomes the NSA can hear these things, and the military is able to hear these things coming from the devices, and they can use that for surveillance. That's a soldier, right? And also, if I call somebody from a two-party consent state and I record that conversation from a two-party consent state without obtaining their consent, that's illegal. And the reason why that's illegal is because that's technically telecommuting. I'm not moving my body, but I'm traveling to a different state. See that? Here when I called Allied Interstate, one of the first things that they said, so one of the first things they said is this call is recorded. So that means that they consent to the call being recorded. And I obviously consent to the call being recorded, and I consent to it implicitly being recorded just by continuing to be on the line. So there's passive contracts and direct contracts to consider when you're thinking about civil infractions. Equally so, civil rights violations. It can be a passive civil rights violation or a direct civil rights violation. Then the next thing that they attack is a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And that's where people really started to get mad. And then they can finally come for this. The First Amendment. You said things we don't like. And we control the entire pipeline from the 1st to the 10th. There's not a goddamn thing you can do about it. You're coming with us. It's a 10-step plan. It's just said in reverse. That's what the anti-federalists were saying. They were like, really? You think your Constitution can't be defeated? I can give you a 10-step fucking plan, player. We're not signing it. We're not ratifying that shit until you clearly enumerate what you're saying is obviously there. And then once those were put there, they were ratified with the Constitution. And the Constitution was not ratified without them. Facts. Period. Black and white. Simple as. No more, no less. 'Tis what it is. And so laws that violate that and laws that allow the violation of those things are unjust laws, and they are unconstitutional laws. And in that case, they must be broken. The enumeration of the Constitution, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So, yeah. I have the First Amendment right to say whatever I want, except for probably this should be a fascist government and we should start executing our own citizens that disagree with me. And I can say that artistically, I can say that in an expression that is unrealistic, I can say that in a heat of passion while not having the actual power and ability to carry that out, and that's fine. But if I'm a leader and I say that, you can't, if I'm of the government and a politician and I say something along those lines, it's a completely different thing. You know, when Trump says, fight, 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 and they want to call that incitement to violence, all we have to do as Trump supporters is remain peaceful. They're chomping at the bit for us to fucking lose our shit the rest of the way. Because they need to prove that that incited something. And in the meantime, we have all the proof we need. Go and harass your Congress people. What happened? They went and harassed their Congress people. Go and bring it to the cities. They burned the cities down. It was mostly peaceful, and keep fighting and do what you need to do. And tell me, Cuomo says, where it says in the Constitution that you have to be nice and peaceful. Let's see. So it would be the First Amendment. Yeah, that's where it says. And so I'll read it for you, Cuomo. This is why I fucking hated this guy. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peaceably to assemble. So what the amendment is saying here is the limitation of government, first of all, and then the enumerated unalienable right to peaceably assemble. That's not something that is granted by the Constitution. That is something that is acknowledged in the Constitution, basically saying, like it or not, people will find a way to peaceably assemble. You want to know how? Because when the Christians were persecuted before the Catholic Church became a satanic church and the Christians became more satanic, and now again we live through the scenario where if you're actually being Christian, you will be persecuted, you will have to carry extra weight, and nobody will notice. We find a way to convene. We find a way to make a church of just 2 or more people. And that becomes dangerous over time. And because of that unalienable, obviously observable, natural right, there's limitations of government that should go into place to basically protect the overall sanctity of the governmental process and to make it so that revolutions don't have to be so violent. Because people have a right to peaceably assemble. That's what that is. But it says peaceably, and it says that right there in the First Amendment, Cuomo. It's right there, peaceably, to assemble. It's literally right there. Yeah, it doesn't mean I have to speak peaceably either. It means I get free freedom of speech, political speech. But my point is, you're on television saying it doesn't have to be peaceful, and that is literally an assembly. So you can say it doesn't have to be peaceful, but don't also say the Constitution, don't imply the Constitution grants it. What you're talking about is you're talking about the Second Amendment when you're talking about co-signing, lighting my fucking minority-owned businesses in my city on fire. And I will remember it on the spot. I don't need to put it in the video, but I'll put it in my diary here. Minority-owned businesses. I'm like, I remember more than one. I was like, is there one that affected? Yes, the Shell on Park and Lake Street. It was such a secure area that it was actually a place that I could, that both me and the dude that ended up with my phone could literally like convene, because it's neutral territory. period, in almost every scenario. It's just known. It was known, okay? And that place was lit on fire. Me being light-skinned, the whitest looking motherfucker in that area, okay? I met the people that own the place. I know they're immigrants. They were nice to me, they had good products, and when people were fucking around on their property, they actually kept it neutral. They would be the ones that would be like, you need to get the fuck off of this property, and if I see you again, it's not going to be fun how I remove you from this property. Kind of people. And safe to be around as fuck. And that place was lit on fire in the name of George Floyd. That's where I start to suspect, like, hey, these people, like me, and I lost my phone, somebody else picked it up, that dude sold it to a dude because he was trying to get rid of it because it's too hot. That dude took the risk of just me harassing him through the device, saying, hey, give it back. He's like, I can give it, like, I paid money for it, which is sucks, because that sucks, now I'm down money, and I'm like, wow, I don't even literally have to, that's just good business right there. I don't literally have to believe you. It's a finder's fee with a little bit of a, a white lie about it. Or it's me recovering the losses of somebody got by, like, me losing my phone in the first place. So either way, it just kind of seems like a service is being provided, so it doesn't matter to me. And I'm like, as long as somebody's willing to talk like this, and we're meeting on neutral territory, I'm down. And I actually met with the person that had my phone after somebody else picked it up at the fucking sidewalk. I harassed the shit out of the first person. They eventually got rid of it. And then it sounded like, because I talked to the first person, it sounded like a different person was the one that I talked to after that. So, but anyway, that's that whole thing. That area was important to me. That area is still Lake Street. I still love, and it's hard for me to drive through because of all the construction. And then I don't know. I kind of just, maybe in time it'll get better, and then I can be like, yay, Lake Street. It's really evolved or something. But it's really devolved. It's really gotten horrible as is. And you guys were no help from out of state. That's what I'm saying. Cuomo. You're talking about the Second Amendment, which would be a flex. Cuomo. But you're saying a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Cuomo. I'll read it for you, Cuomo. This is why I fucking hated this guy. This is the statement. A right of the people to keep and bear arms. That is the acknowledgement of the right, okay? And then here at the end, it says, shall not be infringed. That is the acknowledgement that this here in the same sentence, it's meant to be a limitation of government, not a granting of privileges, meaning not this piece of paper doesn't give me this right. What it does give me the right to do is say, according to this piece of paper, you can't do what you're doing. According to this piece of paper that started all of this here from the beginning, you can't write that law. And if you write that law, I will not obey that law because of this right here. This is the foundation that law stands on. This is actually an extension of my religion as well. That's the funny part about it. In Romans 13:1, it says, let every soul be subject to the governing authority, for there is no authority except from God. And then they say, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. In the Bull, it's stated like this.
Omnis anima potestatibus sublimioribus subdita sit non est enim potestas nisi ad eo quae autem sunt ad eo ordinatae sunt.
And if we look at that, there's a little bit of a difference. Non est enim potestas nisi ad eo. This. What is this? If we just have this word, there's a couple of things to bring up here. It is but, and not and. It is a comparison drawn from the preceding section. So we have, for there is no power except from God, but the things that are. And there's also another thing, are ordained by God. So I'm reading this as, for there is no power except from God, but the things that are ordained by God. So there's a nuance that's actually trying to be said, but it's like they want to say something really, really important that is a separation between the two different ideas, and not necessarily that they were just repeating the same exact sentence. For there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. In English, that comes across a little bit different than how I feel like this does.
Omnis anima potestativus sublimioribus subdita sit non est enim potestas nisi ad eo quae autem sunt ad eo ordinatae sunt.
Okay? So it would be a hell of a flex to say coming into my city and burning all of my shit down is a Second Amendment right of yours, but it's fucking retarded to say it's a First Amendment right, you fucking